So on the subject of brownies, I just talked about Barbara in the last video. I'm just going to do a short one about Beatrice. Beatrice, I mentioned her briefly. She's a small brownie. You can find an image of her in my Journey of Spirit art book. She's 2 inches tall, maybe. Lives at my parents' and lives in the office. It's funny because they live in one of the spaces that are one of the least used spaces in the house. Up in the books, there's a bookshelf built into the wall, and they live kind of in the bookshelf and in the walls of the house. And it's very much like you might have heard the story of the borrowers, or what I actually know more about is the Secret World of Arrietty, Studio Ghibli movie. And it's very much like them. She has mousy features, which is funny because my mom, after I met Beatrice, and I had mentioned Beatrice to my mom once, which my mom is kind of like, she believes in some stuff, thinks I'm crazy on a lot of the other stuff. And I mentioned Beatrice one time, and then my mom puts a centerpiece on the kitchen table and puts a little mouse figurine in it for some reason. And she's just like, I don't know, I just like the little mouse in there. I'm like, I know why. So I was living at my parents', and I learned that Beatrice was there because I was living there I was in their basement for a while, and my parents would leave during the day. And when they left during the day, I was able to go upstairs and kind of transmute and purge the energy to shift it to a vibration that the beings like. The basement was beautiful because in the basement, the vibration was whatever I was, because they didn't go into that one room down there. So beings would come and go, and I could see what was around. Had a lot of experiences down there even before I was living there. Over the past decade of them living in that home, I would sleep in the basement specifically because more experiences, more connection, higher vibration. And so when I was living there, I was able to shift the upstairs more just by existing there. And when they would go, I would shift it more and more. And one day I saw Beatrice kind of climb down one of these shelves in the dining room. And I was like, what the heck? And I saw her. I'm like, you're a little brownie living here. It was the first time I really realized that there were other beings living in the house, not just coming and going like I had experienced, but actually living in the house with my parents. And she goes, yeah, we live up there to stay more away from them, and we like to live in this little space over here. And there's like a little family of them up there. So I started talking to her and built a relationship. I drew her. I think there might be a message in the book about what she said. But I was working with Doug, who's a juniper gnome, still with me, and we were doing a lot of traveling. We would get up because we would go, well, what are we going to do? We can work, we can sit and watch TV, and we can look for apartments. So we would go look for apartments, and then we would also go to the lake, go to different parks, and try to stay in nature as much as we could, because that's where we really experience more joy and healing and stuff. So Beatrice started going with me. And one of the things she said, she's like, we don't go outside a whole lot. They go out a little bit to explore the grounds of the area, but they don't have a large range because they're so small, so tiny. And so they stick closer to the house. And she goes, can I go with you? And I'm like, well, yeah, you can go with me. Why not? Why wouldn't you be able to go with me? So I started taking her out. One time I took her out past the pond of the property, and she would be like, can you lean down and let me off? And she would jump on a log, and she would be collecting like herb or leaves and mosses and stuff and putting them in her bag. She had a bag with her. She was collecting them from the woods, and she's like, we don't get to gift this stuff because we can't get out that far. I'm like, oh yeah, you can hop on and I'll take you out. And then I would go back and pick her up, and we'd go back inside, and she'd jump off and disappear upstairs. So that happened a lot. I took her to a river once, and there was a log there that I always felt had a lot of fae energy to it. There were a lot of mushrooms there, but a lot of fae energy to it. And when I got to that log, she goes, "Can I go down on that log?" And I go, "Yeah." And she's like, "Okay, you can leave me here for a few minutes." And she jumps up and kind of like disappears along with the log. And I can kind of see her talking to different beings that are in that space, and they're trading stuff for, I guess just natural stuff. Here's a leaf I found. Here's an herb or moss or whatever it was. But she was going with me and collecting things in herbs and a lot of medicinal things was the one of the things she had said is she was collecting a lot of medicinal stuff, medicinal energies to take back to the house. So it was just a very interesting thing to experience, an interesting thing to see that even the, excuse me, even though my parents were so much lower vibrational, in the house was like that. And when I'd be in the house, I couldn't see things living there, but I'd see things passing through. It was because the house was in a natural lower vibrational state that you couldn't see them. They're still there. And so I was able to experience them and meet Beatrice and work with her and take her out to different places and see her gather things, gather energies, and trade with other fae. And one of the most astonishing things is when, after this was happening, my mom taking that planter of cacti, putting it down on the table, and me coming over and looking at it and being like, there's a little mouse that my mom had painted, a little ceramic mouse. And she put it down there. And it was just like, I know exactly why, because something subconsciously was acknowledging Beatrice and her family through me meeting them and talking to them. So it was just a very interesting little experience. And you might have little borrowers or brownies or whatever you want to call them living in your house. I met another one a few days ago through a client reading who looks kind of like this. So this is the spirit art. In the client reading, he had come through, and the client actually was able to verify him because I did the wrong reading. And when I say wrong reading, she had picked a different category. It was supposed to be a higher self reading, not a just spirit art reading. And when I sent it, she received it and said like a few hours earlier, her husband or her dad and her son. Her dad and her son were sitting there, and they all saw a rainbow on the wall and could not figure out how this rainbow was cast on the wall. Like the lighting, like nothing, they couldn't figure out how the lighting was making it work. It just didn't make sense. And I had been doing the reading and was kind of like guided by spirit to forget what category it was to do this and send it to her. And she ended up verifying that her son had said the rainbow was made by a fairy dancing. And I explained this being who was about 2 inches tall, 1 to 2 inches tall, and he was he was watching them from this place where a philodendron vine was hanging and a piece of like natural wood molding, and he was walking around a shelf. And I didn't say the philodendron, I just said there was a vine and a vine and a shelf. I don't think I gave her all the details. And she came back to me with a picture of the philodendron, the shelf, the wood paneling or the wood molding. And I was just shocked. it's like, yep, he's there. He's really there. So you may have little people running around your home and just not be able to fully see them with your three-dimensional eyes. But if you open your third eye, make offerings, you'll be able to experience them as well. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm grateful for each and every one of you, and I love you all.